Let's start the meeting. Welcome to the October 30th meeting of the 229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. I'm the chair, Paul Bowman. Will call the roll. Let's go around the room. David, you want to start?
David Ropeik here, present.
Rich Feely, present.
Carl Simon, present.
Pam Rockwell, present.
Gary Kleiman, present.
And Paul Bowman present.
Court Booth is in the hall.
Soon to be present.
Who's going to rejoin us in a moment?
You were in line.
Somebody in line.
We held up taking the roll for your return.
You want
here.
to announce your present?
Thank you.
Work with the president. Great. Okay, welcome here. So, and Kurt Herman.
Hi, Paul.
You want to just announce that you're here?
Hi, Paul. Kurt Herman here.
Thank you. Okay, I think all of our systems are working here. So, you've seen the agenda. Should have a pretty crisp meeting. I'm not sure exactly to what depth we're going to discuss the report today, but before we get to that, I want to go through the minutes. So there are two sets of minutes. One is in the packet and one you've been emailed, and I think some of you have given comments to Rich on the executive session minutes, but let's start out with the October 15th meeting minutes. Are there any comments or edits on those minutes? Hearing none,
Yeah, I thought they were good.
have a motion to,
Second.
okay, roll call vote for acceptance of the October 15th minutes. Aye, David, aye,
Felix, aye.
Kyle,
Booth, aye.
Rockwell, I.
Kleiman, aye.
Bohm, aye, and Herman.
Hi.
Okay, we accepted the October 15th meeting minutes. Let's turn to the executive session that's on your packet. I haven't distributed those because we don't want to distribute them or release or vote on the release yet, but we do want to finalize the minutes. Are there any further comments? So right now, I'll just explain. You've all seen those minutes. There've been a couple of comments. Rich incorporated those. He sent those back out. So you have the revised set of minutes to discuss or to approve. Any further comments on the executive session minutes of October 1st? Okay, we have a motion.
Motion accepting executive session minutes of October 1st.
Second. A roll call vote on the October 1st executive session minutes. David?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Kurt?
Abstain.
Okay, and Paul, aye. So minutes of executive session on October 1st are accepted. There are now two executive session minutes that are in limbo, and before we disband our team, we'll have to vote on the release of those minutes, but not yet. Okay. Select board briefing. So I briefed the select board on the 21st. Several of you were there. I thought it was a good discussion. I made some notes on that, so if you were there and I missed some things, let me know. So, excuse me. I think in general it's very positive. I think Terry, I'm not going in order, but Terry Ackerman, actually it was Mary who said that, I think when we first started, there was a level of anxiety in the select board and in the town. And over the period of time that has been lowered, it's been mitigated quite a bit. I think there was some really good positive comments. I think the select board is in a good place to consider the report and possibly accept our recommendation. We don't know that yet, but I got that sense. So Wendy Rebelli asked, so there are quite a few questions. Wendy asked questions on the timing of our potential input into the remediation plans. When would that have to be? We talked a bit about timing, but I had mentioned that because we would have to pace, that one of the opportunities was to comment on the remediation. So I mentioned as Bruce did, that roughly 2026, they're gonna start that process, so that's kind of the timing, we'd have to have some input. How that's gonna occur, I'm not sure, but that's how I answered. This is the question. Joe's appreciated the public outreach that we've done over the course. Cameron McKinnon asked a couple of things. He wants some clarity. He toured the site and he picked up that the groundwater remediation is not completed, and so he was a little confused about what the town's obligations were, since that remediation won't be completed. And I explained the ongoing remediation of groundwater, which will go on for several decades. We don't know, but that is the part of the operation and maintenance, and that's part of the Maximus's responsibility. It's not the town's responsibility. That our responsibility is to protect the remediation systems, and that's what the institutional controls are all about. He also asked that do we think we are the sole negotiators? Could EPA approach a private party? And I said, well, yeah, I don't know, but I thought, I use the term, I thought we were in the pole position, because I know that the EPA would be very interested in the town taking ownership, but, you know, I didn't know that for sure, so, you know, it's unknown, but I said, the hurdles for a private owner are probably higher than the hurdles for a municipal owner, and I mentioned the lien, so we had that mini discussion. Mark, really didn't have any questions. He talked very positively about the opportunities at the site and picked up on the need to do the planning. The multi-site planning, and for the select board to sponsor a global outlook. But he thought it was a rare opportunity, given those, the big three, MCI, 5299, and Peabody, to do some planning, and that there was probably 7 years to work that out. Of course, the progression of all those. He did mention that the 2229 site had particularly unique in that it's an upland site. It's not next to a river, and so any kind of resilient, sensitive infrastructure, or, you know, might be better placed up there. I hadn't thought about that aspect, but it's true, MCI is on the river. And Peabody's up a little swell, but he did mention that as an opportunity. And he also said that he found the tours very useful. And I think, Rich, to your point, you're arranging another tour, I think, for which group that?
I'm gonna try and get the conservation interests out there. The land trust gonna talk about it at their board meeting next week, and Bruce has been very responsive. So my hope is to get the land trust to sign up for a day, and then I'll announce it to the other conservation groups in town.
Yeah, I think those tours are very useful.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me, a lot of people don't know what's there other than, you know, that Starmet used to be there. The fact that there's a big sphagnum bog or several acres that probably should go into conservation is not well known by some people I talk to.
A question on that, in the remediation progress, have they started cleaning the landfill site that is adjacent to that? And that is slated to be done
That's
when?
they're basically queuing up. They need to get the holding basin stabilized and then surrounded and capped, and then the major the major soil remediations around that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that for the conservation interests in particular, I don't know, maybe it's better that they see it now before that whole area gets chewed up and looks like the rest of the site.
Yeah, although what's, you know, it's the far side of the site, you know, the bog and the hill.
Agreed,
It's
but-
gonna be
yeah.
interesting.
Well, the plan for this gets to chew it up, but they're gonna make some steps.
Yeah, and
The final restoration sounds really great, but
Yeah.
it's ways off there, so, yeah, and I know the tours are part of the whole risk communication plan, so I think those are kind of, really, those aren't over, I think, we'll have to think about that going forward. That was Mark. Terry commented on the outline of the report, she had seen some of that, and she thought that the fact that we considered various options And she mentioned a few of them was really important, you know, how we led to our recommendation. She thought that section 12, the institutional control section, was quite important. She's been focused on that for a while. And a number of them mentioned the section on the experiences with the other towns. I'm not sure if they had this quite useful for the reader to understand how other towns have dealt with Superfund sites and content. So, very complimentary on the report and structure.
Should we put Carrie on as an author, because she wrote some of that? I mean, she was the one that did a lot of that investigation, so
I'm sorry, what investigation?
Carrie Flood as
Oh,
an
Carrie.
author,
She was part of the team that did the investigation and wrote the draft.
yeah.
So she should be listed as an author as well as the
Of our
dedication
report.
being to.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're thinking that's an important part of the
Yeah,
report, then that's her work.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I missed that. Or, so I think that was my notes on, oh, the last thing as far as the letter of interest. Well, there are two things. One, on this letter of interest, I mean, at one point they said, oh, we'll proceed with the letter of interest, but then I think Cameron said, we gotta wait to read the report before we do that. And that makes a lot of sense. There's no rush on that. So I think they understand they have to kick off that process with this letter. But that's not gonna happen probably until early next year after they get the report. The last thing was that Mary asked, well, what does the task force do next? And I said, well, we don't go out of business until, I think the date is 2026, maybe it's 2 years from when we started. And between now and then, we have to present the report, we'll have to finish the
That'd be
report.
2025.
Excuse me? 2025. We have to present the report to the select board, so we'll have a meeting with them after they have a chance to read it. Then we probably have a public hearing. Once the public reads the reports, it gets some comments, so those are, after the report's finished, those are two clear steps, but after that, I said I just tee it up for suggestions. We don't have to discuss that now or at length, the role for this or any other committee, but, I think Mary remarked that you give us this big to-do list, like, how are we gonna get that done? So I kind of said, well, it's up to you guys. So, but we, you know, clearly there's a role for some individuals committee or something to do that. And I think the planning is gonna take a separate track. Whether this planning for this site alone or whether it's part of a larger plan, I don't know. It sounds like it's gonna be part of a larger planning effort. But clearly there are pieces here and we put that on our list. With zoning and other things that are very site specific, so. I don't know if anybody has any comments right now on that, but that's sort of an open question right now, Jim.
I thought the response, I mean, there were a couple of statements that indicated to me that people were gonna be fairly willing to appropriate some money for lawyers, which we know is the first step. But you know, the response was even more positive than I would have expected. And that people recognize that, you know, we need lawyers and we need to pay for them.
Well, I proposed that, I think it was a select board meeting. See the chair's breakfast of the select board meeting after that, there's, I don't wanna misspeak here, but there's ARPA money. There's uncommitted ARPA money that there was some discussion about committing that to 2229 expenses.
Yes, that did come up.
Yeah, that,
When,
I forgot when that came.
because they had about 200,000 that they hadn't allocated and have to allocate by December 31st.
But I thought they had like 500,000, I mean, I thought they had a ton of
Yeah, but they.
internal things they wanted to spend it for, so.
But they committed a lot of that, but there are some uncommitted funds, and I don't know how much they are. But anyway, the thought was that would, I don't know, Terry, you want to comment on that, but there are some funds available for the next steps at this site.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I don't know that there's an exact number. But Carrie, proposed it to the board. Later in the night when we were going over ARPA. She proposed that, some amount be designated for the current fiscal year for legal. And then the following year, they are doing those budgets right now that are going to this next town meeting, so she can include it. But the current year doesn't have any legal costs included in this budget for 2229, so she was proposing using some amount of ARPA money. And Paul, you summed it up really well. The select board was very enthusiastic, and I think the site walk was really, really helpful. One other comment I had was about the minutes. I didn't quite hear what you said, but I think you approved the executive session minutes, but you're not going to release them at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in fact, there are two sets of executive sessions. We've had two executive sessions. Both those minutes are in abeyance right now. They've been approved, but
Right.
we will vote on their release before the task force expires, so.
No, yeah, you don't need to do even that. They don't need to be released until the matter is concluded.
Okay,
That's how you can vote it.
So 2029,
Could be.
well, that's a good point. Yeah, so
Well, we could vote to release them, you know, after final disposition of.
Exactly.
acquisition is decided, so
Right.
that we either have walked away or we
Right.
acquired a site and then we could.
yeah, exactly.
Because then it wouldn't have been.
that makes sense.
David,
A question for you and Terry, I wasn't at the select board meeting. The first comment that you said Mary made is interesting to me, that there was a lot of, she described, anxiety
exactly, that's the word, yeah.
that has somewhat abated. Did she describe any further what she meant by that?
Well, I think she was speaking for the select board. I don't think she was speaking for the whole town.
Right.
Yeah, I think, when I started this and there was concern. I mean, everybody had concerns about a lot of matters, risk, liability, protections, but we've kind of covered those. So I think she's just talking about those, the various risk factors, whether they're health or liability, that at least they know that those are manageable. I'm putting words in her mouth, but I think that was the
She was
anxiety.
speaking for the select board's concerns rather than the town.
I believe so, yeah.
That's
absolutely.
correct.
Thank
That's
you.
correct.
Yeah, if I can further parse words, not having been at that meeting at all. My sense at the conclusion of the last, committee report was that the select board appreciated the hard work that had gone into writing a report, but that they didn't feel prepared to act on what we had found. And I think that's probably the apprehension or the concern that the select board had, was like, they now feel like they have the information they need to act.
Right, and that act, as I described, is a fairly low risk act. It's just express interest in
Right.
and commit money to the town council, start figuring things out, and maybe planning in parallel, so. I think we're in a good place, but we still have to finish the report. So let me just get on, any other comments on that?
I had a question about, you were, at the end, you were saying that there's sort of two different planning efforts or something. That's what I'm trying to understand, that there, there were some immediate next steps and then, the subsequent disposition of a planning mechanism. And I'm trying to understand how they're different, because to me, the answer to Mary Hartman's concern is, yes, we've asked the select board to identify the next phase of planning. Is that not what they had in mind?
I think they have this, I don't speak for Megan, but the plan department is thinking about that, has been thinking about that. I don't know what the plan is, but they developed a matrix of sites and needs, and so there's some activity going on right now, which involves this site. We don't, and yes, we made that recommendation, so I don't know anything further about the exact.
No, I'm not asking about the nature of that. I mean, it sounded like Mary was saying there's a role for this body or an individual or somebody to advise them on like immediate next steps. And it seems to me that is the role of chapter 14. And so like, do we need to put more effort into chapter 14 based on what you heard from her?
I I don't think for the report, it may need a follow-up, maybe a follow-up step is to put, is a separate activity, to put some meat on chapter 14 on that. I wouldn't do it for this report.
I thought Mary's question was a little bit rhetorical in the sense that she didn't know the answer and she knows we don't know the answer. And they're gonna study the report and then probably, and again, forgive me for guessing what she's thinking. But Terry can weigh in with her opinion. I imagine they're gonna ask, is there still a role for this committee? And if so, what might it be on behalf of the town, the select board, and town staff?
Right.
And then they'll see what they come up with.
Yeah, and
But I mean, just playing devil's advocate, like, we've clearly identified there is a need for planning.
Mhm.
And we're actually asking them to like create, it's, you know.
Are we actually asking them to create a planning committee? I don't
Well,
know.
I think
because
we're
I
leaving
actually
it to
think
them to
we're-
decide, right?
We're,
we're leaving it then only because, I know that there's been discussion on the select board, and Terry can weigh in on planning, and Mark mentioned that at the meeting, that, you know, there's at least 3 sites and multiple needs. So there's some activity that either is taking place or has to take place. What role is there for us? I'm not sure, but if I look at those next steps, some of those are very site specific, so if select board needs some help in some of those next steps, like developing a institutional control plan, or developing a risk communication plan, or some very specific item, maybe those would be some of the things.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would
we're
say that
speculating.
we've reached a point in life where maybe it's time that those are staff positions, not volunteer committee positions, because
And
it
we
feels
had
like
recommended
the
that
volunteer
earlier.
committees take a lot longer to get things done than actually, you know, making a decision and doing it because you know what you want to do. And
Yeah,
I,
let me ask Carl, and then Terry, I'll ask you to comment on the whole planning thing. Carl, you,
I mean, when I look at our initial next steps for 2025, they're all select board actions. So, you know, so it's not clear from our next steps that between now and May 2025, there's a clear, you know, role for the committee. For the task force,
Yeah, I-
just based on that, I mean, later, when you get to 2026, 2027, you know, there are issues where there might be support for a
Yeah.
committee, but it doesn't, you know, from what we've laid out, that in the near term.
I agree.
it doesn't.
and through 2025, town council has the actual tangible actions, you know, going forward. Terry, just any general comment on
Well,
planning?
okay, so, first of all, to clarify, there will be a select board discussion in December, I believe, on planning, the first of many discussions on planning for 3 properties we're gonna start with, 2229 Main Street, MCI, and Peabody School. And Megan is making a matrix with staff. And, to have at that discussion, it's going to have some potential uses like DPW or affordable housing or whatever. And so we're going to talk through this. I hope it's a 1-page kind of a matrix that we can just get our discussion started. There will be lots of follow-up after that, I'm sure. So this is just the
Yeah.
initial. The second thing I wanted to say was in terms of future steps for this committee. I think that is TBD. Let's see, first of all, finish the report, let the select board read it, have questions. Then secondly, we're gonna have a public forum. Let's see what the, you know, is anxiety still high in the town? Is it coming down? You know, where are we with that? And then third, what about you guys? You know, last but not least, some of you may want to continue in some role or in some follow-up committee. I know some of you, when you were appointed, said right off the bat, you know, I only have this much time and I'm not going to be on a follow-up committee. So there's a lot to be decided from your
Good.
point of view, as well as from the select board and the public. So I think we'll cross all those bridges when we get there in early 2025.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we gotta finish this report. So can we turn to the report yet, any final?
well, I was saying that the 2229 committee isn't a planning committee, the Main Street Oversight Committee, but they could certainly support a town risk communication program by being there for site visits. They can certainly support the town in making comments
Right.
to change the shape of the cleanup and. You know, that's something that could continue by just having people who are interested on that committee.
Okay,
So,
let's talk about the report. So, I think we're getting close. We're not done yet, and we'll talk about that. So I'm starting to think about timing and finalizing and voting. I'm working backwards. I mentioned to the select board that we would deliver the report then before Christmas, give a Christmas present. So what I'm thinking is that, and I haven't finalized this with Chris in terms of outsourcing we have identified a vendor. I'm not sure we identified the funding for the vendor, but we identified a vendor that I would like to turn a report that looks something like this over to them for final production, which would be editing and formatting and everything else to produce a report. I'd like to do that before Thanksgiving, so that would, at the latest.
Have they given you a deadline as to when
No,
they need to have it in order to produce it by before Christmas?
no. I had one discussion with Chris, I'm staring at him, and he thought it would be 3 to 4 weeks to turn around. This is not a big effort, I don't think, but, so let's call it a month of the
so,
absence.
so my question is, are we going to have them edit the appendices? Some of the appendices are committee produced.
Well, let's talk in general, because I want to get to the appendices separately. That's a separate topic, so I'm just talking about timing right now. We have, 2 more meetings before, we have 3 more meetings before the holidays, and I think we'll be done, hopefully after those 3 meetings, and then we'll talk about briefings with the select board and the town, and a public forum, separate from our meetings, but I think we have 3 more meetings here. I'd like to be in a position to, so I think this is that we can vote on the acceptance of the report before we have a produced version. That's an assumption, you know, you can push back, I mean, you may want to see the final version, but if we have something that we're turning over to produce, we can probably vote on that, so.
So that's the next meeting.
Well, I don't know, but I think we should vote on that before we turn it over to the production company, so we don't have to wait till that report goes back.
I agree. I mean,
So-
if they're not changing the content of it, then.
Then it can change the content and, yeah, so that's one of the next 2 meetings. I think we probably still have some work to do, so maybe the next meeting is early, but certainly the next one after that. So before Thanksgiving, we probably should vote on the report, I think, because I think we're 95% of the way there, I believe. Not to say that when you read it, there won't be more comments, but the number of comments that I'm getting have been attenuated. And I've been trying to keep up. There's no guarantee that I get every comment, but I've been trying as they come in to do the edits and take that email and put it somewhere else, so.
Are you
But
still
I-
working on edits that are gonna get into this that are not, or are you,
There may be a few more that are coming after
that you will
this.
put in?
This is,
You don't want repeats of things that didn't make it in.
well, we're not done. If you read
Yeah.
something here
Yeah.
in this version, then you're still open for comments. It's
Okay,
not close, so, but I'm just saying I'm trying, this has probably every comment that I've received thus far. There are a couple of loose ends. One of them I want to kind of, so that's kind of my sense of the timing. Okay, I think we can probably do that. We haven't closed on the risk communication chapter in the appendix, even though I've had some offline comments with both of you. So I want to see where we are on that. So that's kind of an open section. I don't think any of the other sections are kind of open. The appendix is kind of open, and one of the questions on the appendix is whether the printed report, so this started with Pam said we don't put the entire Rue report in the appendix, I said, well, we can't print that up, but if we printed the appendix and then printed the report, and then all the appendices online, like we did with the reuse report, maybe that would be the way to go, so we don't have to worry about the volume of it, or printing, we can put the whole Rue report, it's there right now. We're not limited by page count.
So if we didn't, if we decided we wanted to print the appendices, in which case we amended the town charge, so it doesn't include the grant, so it's only a few pages, and we only include the report, the human health risk assessment executive summary, which is only 5 pages instead of 1,000 pages. We're still talking about adding 50 pages to the report.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to print out.
Well, I'm suggesting it's open for discussion that all the appendices are online. The only thing gets printed is the main report. Does that, anybody have any?
You know, I mean, I defer to the consensus of the group. I suspect I'm an outlier. I wouldn't print any, I would never have printed all of these. I think these days, everybody uses electronic PDFs, and I would just do it all electronically. But if you're gonna print anything, I definitely wouldn't print appendices, and I would make all of them available online. What's wrong with having the full report accessible online on the website? And then you have no limit. You can have, additional appendices. The other thing that I would, say at this time, because again, I think I'm probably the outlier, but, I look at an 87-page report, and I know I sent this comment to you. I just want to share it with the committee, and I'll disagree with me. I think chapters 9, chapter 10, and even maybe chapter 13. Chapter 9 and 10 are sort of the criteria and how we came to a decision and alternatives we considered. I think what adds the narrative is what's the decision we came to and what was the basis for it. And so I feel like it could be, a couple of short paragraphs that introduce and be part of chapter 11. But I'm fine with the report as it is. I think it reads long, and I would be looking for ways to make it more digestible by shortening it. And I think that, some things could go in the appendix, but
So
I'm not a no vote. I'm a yes vote on the way it's written right now, so.
Okay, well, there's the two things swirling around. One is sort of what's in the report, the other thing is the printing part of it.
Yeah.
You make a good point. Maybe none of it has to be printed. The online version has to look nice, but I don't know.
Yeah, you get it graphically, laid out.
there are gonna be people who print it out, and so having it in separate appendixes versus that is.
Two
Yeah,
PDFs.
2 PDFs,
Yeah.
one is the main report and one is the.
Well, the appendices
People-
can be, if we do it like the reuse report, each appendix is a different link that you can look, so.
Do we want to print copy? I'm sure we can find some budget for the printing. I think.
I would agree with Gary.
Sorry?
I would agree with Gary. Printing's unnecessary.
Yeah.
The World Bank stopped printing reports, hard copy reports, like 4 years ago.
People could print it out themselves if they want a hard copy.
I would point out that what you said about pulling those sections out,
Hmm.
that this morning I would have agreed with you, but you just said that the select board was really interested in seeing that information about how we prepared. And I think if it's in an appendix, they might not ever click on that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it depends on, which elements you're talking about, and I'm not talking about taking out the substance of 9 and 10 completely. But rather, I think they could be summarized in, like, that we already have the survey criteria in an appendix.
Yeah,
So a short paragraph statement that, we reviewed these 13 criteria. A short paragraph that says, we consider, 4 different alternatives, I think is totally worthwhile and worth keeping in there.
well,
just
especially if
don't
we're
know.
not printing it, I think we should leave the whole thing.
I think we keep it in there. I mean, I think, as I said to you in the email, partly because I wrote it, but it's part of the story. Here are our findings, and so here are the things we considered before we came to this recommendation. And here are the criteria. I think those are important. I wouldn't put those in the appendix.
Well, and again, our target audience is that select board.
And each of the sections is only a few pages.
I mean, it's 5 or 6 pages.
Yeah, the nice
Yeah,
part of this
no,
report
I'm
is
just
there's
trying to
no
make it
section.
more reasonable, but that's fine. I'm good with that.
I think it's a better, more complete reflection of the task force
Yeah.
work.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement. we're not gonna print anything, we'll get it produced, so the PDF online looks really nice, but we're not gonna print it.
That shortens the deadline. Production
Yeah.
is shorter, you don't have to physically produce it, lay it out.
Yeah,
do
Paul,
need
you
to-
might offer hard
Software.
copies to the select board. That's my suggestion, but other than that, I wouldn't do hard copies.
Yeah, we may want to, we'll print out some color copies to give them, sure, that makes sense.
I've heard two things about the appendices, one, a single PDF, another is links. I would opt for the latter, I think people should be able to cherry pick what they wanna see, what they wanna pull up and print out, or what they wanna open up and close again.
When you look at the Envision Concord website, it also is a model where, there were A through, I don't know, W, appendices and, all of individual links that you can go to. But they're all, PDFs that we link to.
So right now, we have, there's a bit of a hybrid between, written documents and links. And I think that's
So,
fine.
so I don't, the only two links that are left in the appendix are the link to the committee charge and the human health risk assessment. Everything else is an actual document that the town wrote that is not published somewhere else. That's in the appendix right now.
And also,
And then
just,
there's a separate set of links, and I've been going through and trying to find, like, you saw my correspondence with Kara about getting a bunch of things that she had sent to you, that the committee had used, that we referenced, that were never public. They're now in the public repository, so I can put links into those. So there's no reason for anything except those two potential things.
just to follow up on the earlier comment, the Envision Concord website, it is a series of links. But what they link to is actually a PDF file.
Right.
Like, it's not necessarily that I love the town's website, the way they have it formatted, but it's like, you have to download an individual PDF file for each of those annexes. But there's also a master copy, one PDF that has all of the appendices, the front matter and the appendices in a single file. So if you want to,
Hyperlink your way
you
through.
can download the whole 20 megabyte file.
So I want to have a separate discussion, about just what should be in the appendices, because Pam has listed out the documents. Want to make sure we have everything that's important, that supports the main text that's in there, so I want to get to that in a minute, but, before I do that, let's talk about the risk communication chapter, which is 13. 13. So right now in the packet you have here, it's David's version, which incorporates some of Pam's major comments. So he's pulled in Pam's comments in there, so that captures a bit of combination of the two.
It also, pardon me, reflects the changes that I've made in response to the board's discussion about the chapter. Taking out reference to environmentalism and things like that, so that conversation also shaped the reading.
So it covers,
Page 74.
yeah, so it covers of that many-page risk communication appendix that I wrote, adapting it to Concord. It actually covers most of that material. There are 2 points that got deleted from that I kind of thought ought to be there. One was the idea that at permitting meetings, that you should move the comment period about that subject up to you when you're discussing it and not at the end of the meeting. So that's more likely to lead to appropriate conversations and let people not have to, sit for hours to discuss their concerns and be able to do a back and forth when you're actually talking about it. And I've actually found that takes the edge off and makes things happen and get addressed at early meetings so that they don't get, discussed at the town meeting or at the select board meeting level.
It's interesting because we're getting into board protocol now.
Yeah, it's beyond, in my opinion, I took it out because length,
Yeah,
and it's the protocol of how people run their meetings, and it didn't seem like it was our call to recommend.
Last week, the school board, put their comments at the end of the meeting, which caused some, upset on the part of people who said, what does it mean if it's merely an exit comment.
I agree with you in terms of the process,
But
but I just didn't think it was our place to include, and for length's sake.
I mean, I'm just looking at item 5 here, town permitting and budget meeting. I mean, we could add a sentence that said,
Yeah,
your meeting
consider,
chairs may want to consider
consider the time,
incorporating questions.
public comment period.
Public comments, or we could add that point as an option, not as a recommendation.
It
It
didn't
makes
seem
it-
like it was our place to do, but we could.
Yeah, I think a lot of work and a lot of, sweat and conversations gone into this. I really
Yeah.
appreciate the effort. It's 7+ pages. I wouldn't want to increase the length. I think the objective here is to lay out what a plan should look like and not present the plan,
Right,
right? That it's sort of template for the plan.
it's like a framework. for the
It's a
plan.
framework for the plan, so it came, because there'll be a next step, and that's to design this and, with one of the select board members, hopefully kind of spearheading it, but. So I think we're there. I don't mind adding a sentence or two, but, you know.
Right, yeah, I thought you did a very good job
Yeah.
of incorporating the additional content that Pam had developed and responding to our comments.
Pam, would you be happier if the second sentence of 5 is left passive? There are opportunities, is the way it reads now. That somewhat satisfying. I'm sure you. Right here.
Okay.
Item 5, page 77.
Yeah.
Would that move you in the direction you're discussing without expanding this thing? or-
Instead of there are opportunities,
Instead of there are opportunities, there's something,
More proactive. the
more
town should.
proactive, yeah, exactly.
So the reason
So-
these are opportunities. It's not there, it should be these or there.
or opportunities, yeah.
It reads, these
Right.
are opportunities.
Which is,
I think that's correct. I think that's correct.
I think that's what was.
You wrote
Yes,
Yeah, so the line that I had in the appendix was, taking the time to have these discussions at the earliest part of the permitting or budgeting process makes it more likely that the issues can be addressed. Oh,
it's pretty
by
close.
scheduling public comment to occur during or immediately after the site is discussed, rather than wait to the end of the meeting. So that a true back and forth. The town can maximize the benefit of these interactions by scheduling public comment to occur during or immediately after the site is discussed, rather than wait until the end of the meeting.
I'm not sure there's any substance to the paragraph.
So this is I look at this as a report that gives people the history to move forward with. And one of the things we learned by doing the 2229 committee, by doing the reuse committee, was getting people involved early in the process, again, so that it wasn't at a town meeting or.
It says
It
it
says that.
these are opportunities to engage citizens with diverse expertise at the early stage of the permitting and budgeting process,
It says that.
which will provide more opportunity and depth.
Well, again, letting people speak at the time things are discussed in the meetings is a piece of information we've learned from doing this for 20 years that works.
I don't disagree, because.
And it'd be nice to mention it somewhere.
I guess
Anyway, that's-
the crux here is, the question here I'm hearing is, do we wanna be a little more directive about it?
Well, we're just
We're not
saying that this
directed,
is something
but-
that's worked for Concord.
but be more specific about that action item. In other words, you're saying very specifically that when an item's being discussed, rather than moving on to the next item, you should open up questions of public comment for that item. So people's participation, is more immediate and doesn't get deferred.
And that, I think,
Yeah.
helps with risk communication, is when you can actually hear people's question when you're.
It will help with the risk communication, but this doesn't have to be in the overall description of what a risk communication plan should have. It will help with the actual process.
I
Yeah,
don't-
but where is it gonna be? Who's gonna have that if this gets turned over to staff to come up with a risk communication plan or?
I mean, this paragraph is about the use of meetings for risk communication.
Yeah.
And within
And
that
I'm saying,
context,
yeah,
putting forward that, maybe not prescribing that, we're putting forward it as a.
I think
as
that-
a-
An example.
As a.
How about a
as a-
parenthetical in there that says e.g., you know,
Yeah,
I'm okay with that, if you don't say here, there's no other place to say it.
right.
It just doesn't feel like it's our place to recommend to committees how they run the meetings. That does not feel like risk communication.
Well, or we can say that in the past, this has been
And-
effective at
And B, it doesn't
addressing
seem like,
people's concerns at a low level.
excuse me, it doesn't seem like it's our place to recommend to the planning board and to whomever, take your questions, we're in the middle. I love the idea, it just doesn't feel like it's a committee's place to tell it. But I'm glad to put the wording in, because let's move on.
I agree with.
Not worth
I
spending
agree with-
time.
I would agree with both of you that it's an important issue, but that maybe it doesn't have to be in here. I don't care one way or another if you guys are happy putting it in there. But 100% sure that when this moves forward, the select board's gonna turn to somebody here to help with this, so,
What, might,
this is the last thing.
Paul, might we ask, again, Pam, what would be first, verbiage that would suggest, robust communications, early, engage people in a process and build trust, because I think that's what you're
The
asking.
town may be able to maximize the benefit of these interactions by scheduling public comment to occur during or immediately after the site is discussed. What's that?
That's fine. Send me that addition,
Okay,
I'll put it in there, and we'll all review it one more time, because thing is voted on, so.
You got it?
Okay, good. I got it, yeah, I got it.
think of parentheticals like e.g. And then using that, could be a nice way to. There are footnotes.
so the other one thing, the other paragraph that I had in the appendix that I thought was important was actually something that, but was a history lesson about what had occurred at the site that indicated that people were choosing to do an effective job, and not taking the easy way out, and so it was a paragraph that said, while Textron and Whitaker have always carefully justified their expenses, they've already shown that they are acting proactively to identify new problems at the site and take care of them quickly. Early in the 2000s, they chose to dispose of barrels of beryllium metal dug up during the remediation investigation off-site, rather than store them at the site for 20 years until the final remediation was developed as would be the normal process. They chose to remove buildings at the site and dispose of the hazardous building materials off-site, even before the record of decision was released by the EPA. In 2014, while the record of decision was being developed by EPA, new technology allowed them to detect a cleaning solvent, 1,4-dioxane, in the groundwater plume heading under the Aspet River towards drinking water wells in Acton. Rather than risk the solvent reaching a drinking water well, they proactively set up a well for hydraulic control of the plume, and later installed the pump and treat system that currently operates at the site. They also discovered the solvent in the bedrock and have developed a remediation strategy for that newly developed plan. As new issues arise, these companies have shown that they want to characterize and address them quickly and safely, and Concord continues to benefit. And that's an example of how this adversarial relationship between Textron and Whitaker and the federal government, who are all responsible parties, actually benefits Concord. And that's hard examples from the past that it
And
worked.
what I summarized it as was, as new issues have arisen during cleanup work, Textron and Whitaker, these companies have demonstrated that they want to address them quickly and safely.
So this was the
So I
reason,
don't have the full history lesson details.
you're right,
Which I
this was why
summarized.
it was in an appendix. Was because you're right, it's a history lesson, it was in an appendix. This is the only thing that's left in the appendix that I kind of think maybe ought to be somewhere, but probably in the appendix.
Well, at the end of that sentence, can we have a footnote, and then in the footnote, just have a couple sentences
Yeah, that's a
explaining
good
their
way
history?
to deal with it.
Because he already has the sentence saying, his new issues have
Okay.
arisen, you
It's
know,
a
they
long-
want to address them
It's
quickly
a
and safely.
100-page paragraph.
I understand, and I'm saying, can we put a footnote and summarize that in a
Or
few
take,
sentences?
take one or two examples, I mean, you list multiple examples.
I don't think we need that level of detail, because all of
I-
that detail is in
Just-
documents that are already online. And
One comment, we need to be just careful that we don't over characterize all the actions by Textron and Whitaker as quick and safe. I'm sure there are examples in the record somewhere that are probably contradict that, so we just need to be careful with the wording there.
I think that is a solution to distill it a bit,
Okay,
and footnote it. It'll look fine and people will go to it.
so you want me to write a sample note, footnote, send it to you, David?
You know, to Kurt's point, I don't think this ought to read like we are defending, actually defending the cleanup, you know, and we're responding as a Tetra and Whitaker, we're responding, we're sort of, this is still, what's the plan look like?
So-
This is just, it seems to be getting, but write the footnote, it seems to be getting too much into detail.
There's also, remember that this section is proposed, suggested, some messages.
Right.
It's not the be all and end all of every last message. And that will be developed and be dynamic as things change. So how much detail we choose to put in the proposed message area is where this would go.
So I want to point out that we wrote a reuse report that basically says what this report says. And the select board did not choose to go forward with taking the property. So they gave us, again, this task of doing that. And I think the reason that I am twisting everybody's arms here is because I don't want to have to write this report again in another 2 years. I really want to get as much risk communication aimed at the select board so that they are actually have that kind of information. So I agree that, yeah, that's something that ought to be there. That's where I'm coming from. If everyone feels like they don't need this.
I think two things are being intertwined here. This report, this risk communication plan is not for the select board. The body of the report, the human health risk, all the due diligence that we've done through our findings and the work stream, that's for the select board. This is for telling the select board, moving forward, this is for the public.
Here's what you would say to others about.
This is not to convince the select board.
I understand that that's true, but there is not a place in this report where we talk about why we have confidence that the government will follow through and that these companies will follow through with the.
Yes, it is. Several times we talked about that. I've said.
Because
yeah,
there are laws.
This is why.
And I'm saying, and there's, it's because there's history of them doing it.
I guess what confuses me, and you know much more about this than I do, you do too, Paul, but your paragraph there drew a direct line between risk and confidence in Whitaker and Textron. And I think our confidence is in EPA and DOJ. I don't think we should draw a direct line between the town and Textron and Whitaker.
And I think David summarizes that point here with the beginning of the paragraph, you know, a unique arrangement of responsible parties, all subject to the legally binding consent decree, encourages doing the more complete.
Well, this was the
language.
balance, yeah,
Yeah.
this is the balance of that.
Right, so I mean, I think that paragraph does a good job of laying out this arrangement. And I think having a specific footnote, I'm comfortable actually
Right.
adding a footnote saying, see, it really does work.
Right.
That they did it
They
in
did
this
do that.
instance.
Or it supports.
Even though,
the
you know, Kurt's
contention
like-
that's made.
Well, as
Correct.
Kurt said, you could word it as one example.
As one example, exactly. I would
Right.
be more comfortable with that, some way of like, not saying they're always gonna be responsible, but making the
In the
point that
past,
this
they have
has.
shown
I
that
should
they
be-
have been.
But can you do it? Not all the
Recent.
detail, yeah.
Recent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we could
Well, I
write this
think-
is way too long for a footnote.
But I think having a specific example is good,
Yeah,
because,
I
you
agree.
know, you could read this and say, why are we defending these two companies that were involved in the cleanup originally, and having an actual demonstrated case where their actions have supported the statement we're making, I think it's important to the credibility.
Yeah, so I can imagine if I'm doing the risk communication for the town and somebody asks me,
Yeah.
oh yeah, well, we don't trust companies.
Right.
And you could say, yeah, well, look at what they did,
Right.
because they wanna save money.
Well, we don't trust the company, for instance, that did all this, that dumped all this stuff. You know, I mean, it really is identifying, it is kind of focused on people who have that memory of how hard it was to get Starman to clean it up.
You trust.
Okay, I think we're good.
Yeah, we are good, but I want to remind you, the town will not take ownership of the site until remediation of the ground was completed. It's not, you know, it's not gonna be speculative, it's to the point where the EP is gonna say, we're done with soils, we're done with the holding base, we're done with everything except for the O and M on the groundwater. That's it. That's the point that the town will say, okay, we have that assurance in writing. So when you say, how do we know it's gonna happen? They're gonna happen in writing, it's good, I believe it's gonna be part of the negotiation, the legal negotiation.
I
It
think
should be.
we're all a little nervous about what's going to happen to the government next week. I mean, I don't know, that, yes, we will have that answer before this report goes in, but
You should be
You know-
worried about having supports, not the government.
There-
This is a consent decree,
yeah,
and the executive branch, as far as I know, under the Constitution, doesn't control the judiciary. Now, if it does, then
Well, we've already addressed that by saying, and you said it, Pam, that the money, or somebody said it in all of your writing.
Right.
The money for this is in escrow, it's not subject to annual budgetary processes in Congress, so that's in there. The language, however, here says, a unique arrangement of responsible parties, all subject to the legally binding consent decree, encourages doing a complete job and getting ahead of new issues. So it's not just the SWARE level. It's if something else comes up.
Right,
We have this example that says they've shown that they wanna get ahead.
yeah, and there's several
Okay.
other places in the report we've said that with one for dioxane and other things. And there's a PFAS example somewhere there, PFAS comes up. And we also talk about in the liability section, the future liability of legacy contaminants, we talked about that being part of the settlement agreement that something else with that, so
So, yeah, you put
I think we got this covered. Yes,
okay,
and footnote,
so I'm getting to, I'm adding a footnote and I'm sending you a sentence.
exactly. And with that, we will have the risk communication.
Done.
So my only question here, since, I don't know, there may be some confusion what this section is. Is it the risk communication plan or is it a risk communication plan? You know
I
what
would
mean?
say framework for risk communication.
What should the title be here, just to confuse anybody, so nobody reads and says, okay, this is the plan.
I'm with Carl, we don't, that's not no charge to produce a plan.
I like that.
Produce a recommendation, or in your case, a framework, I think is very good.
Was it a
Well,
framework?
actually,
Framework for risk communication.
And that's
it
where the
does
whole
actually say we're supposed to produce a risk
Wow.
communication plan in our charge. It's, we're punting that the same way. We're also not saying that you're definitely going to take the site.
Well, this was a distinction that you and I traded off on. My understanding of the charge was a risk communication plan for what we do while we're the task force,
Okay,
not a plan going forward. So I like, that's my understanding. So I like Carl's thing, and by the way, that goes with all the wording that I had at the beginning, which is here's a framework and how to think about it broadly, so that title
Yeah,
is helpful.
that takes the ambiguity, if there's any out of this section. I think that's right.
And it makes clear that we understand that we're not here to allocate resources toward anything, that's not in our capacity.
Do we want to use the word plan again, or should it say framework for future risk communication? Yeah,
I like what you just said.
it's framework for future risk communication.
There you go. What do you think, David?
That's fine.
Just a twist on that framework for ongoing risk communication.
Yeah, sure. Good.
What does ongoing mean? There's nothing ongoing, right? Is it ongoing
Means
now?
it's happening now and
Is it happening now?
Effectively, it is. Their plan, their official plan, no. Are people talking about this? Will they talk about it after every meeting? Will it be a bridge article, all of that? Ongoing isn't a bad suggestion. Think of the conversation having already begun
Yeah.
years ago and already.
and we've had public meetings.
Yeah, it's not a bad suggestion.
right, and you know, as the select board reads this report, you know, in December, whenever it lands on their desk, they can start using this information
Now.
day one,
Correct.
you know.
So framework for ongoing risk
Risk
communication.
By the way, I think a lot of this wordsmithing nuance will be completely lost, but it's worth discussing here.
It probably isn't the only section.
It will be completely, well, perhaps, but it will eliminate future ambiguity.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm all for it.
little things like that. Hey, this is good communication plan, did you guys write this? Oh, this is the framework, I like it, yeah. Okay, we have a path for that. What other sections of the report require that, other than comments and editing and tweaking, are there any substantive?
Yeah, I've made a comment a couple of times on chapter 5 that I don't think it's necessarily being ignored, I think it's just difficult to rectify. But it bothers me that there's this, it's just a sequencing thing, the number. Well,
I'm reading mine online.
yeah, me too, so it's bottom of 28, top of 29, maybe, let me see.
Rouge study. On the printout,
So, no,
29.
yeah, on the printout, it's the bottom of 29. This chart summarizes RU's findings for cancer and non-cancer risk from residential use at the site. And we have a summary of, this table that has these areas. And so somebody reading this for the first time, it's like, there are these areas 1A, 1B, 2, and 3. And then 2 pages later, we start talking about exposure areas as defined by RU in agreement with the task force were developed. And then we describe what these exposure areas are, 1A, 1B, 2, 4, 5. It just seems to me that the description of the exposure areas should come before we present the results with the exposure areas, because there's no introduction of what these, and we've already talked about, like, it's very confusing already, different numbering. So I would love to see if there's a way, and I don't know how to do it.
No, I'll move it, I think
That's a good point.
because this, so I had a little trouble here moving things around, I wanted to have
Yeah,
what Rue did, and then what we have, how we have interpreted, that's.
No, and
tax finding.
and I realized that paragraph, that last paragraph, exposure areas as defined by RU, by the end of it, you're talking about overall the applications of residential exposure, you're drawing findings. And so, you may not want all of that paragraph to move up before the table, but I feel like at least the introduction to what the areas are should. So
Yeah,
it may require splitting, I don't know.
Good point, I didn't ignore you, I just didn't, I didn't know how to pull that apart, so that's, I will pull it apart.
The exposure areas map, could that go at the end of methodology? Because that was their methodology, was dividing up.
Well, it's one, yeah, I mean, it's one, the
And that-
methodology section is a little bit short here, because it could be really long. I mean, methodology could be, beyond the exposure areas, it could be.
But I mean, it's a good point, in the methodology, you could define the exposure areas or something.
And put the map there, and then it is.
Yeah, and then,
It's
Okay,
closer, it's on page 28, and it's still 2 pages in the other direction, so I don't know.
yeah, I think we should move that up.
Maybe those 2 things should be together in the same discussion. I mean, maybe the 2 pictures should be together, and then the descriptions can be.
anyway, I mean, it's more of an editorial comment, in fact, almost all, that's all I have left, editorial comments, I had a number, I emailed you, I think. I have a bunch of editorial.
Keep
but they're
coming,
just-
keep coming, so, I don't want.
I think it's
time here, but, so. Yeah, any other, that's comment worthy of discussion here, any other?
Yeah, Paul, you and I have discussed this, but with court here, there's one place in which I think we haven't really told them what we think. And I realize it can be caveated, but we've just got a list of the ways you can acquire the site. And at least what I've taken away from the year and a half, EPA really does not want to take it. I mean, I'm not saying it
But we
couldn't
had this
happen.
discussion before, we want it in there because we want our lawyer to be able to say, hey, this is something we.
Yeah, the only reason we kept it in there was that Nina made such a deliberate point of, informing, Kara and, help me out, who was it?
The DOJ lawyer.
Yeah, the DOJ lawyer, that indeed there was a precedent for this, and he cited the precedent. And so he's still hanging on to this. And I think he wants to exhaust the potential, that's all, and he hasn't done so yet. I don't think it's gonna happen either, I agree with you, but
Yeah.
it's not for us to decide. He wants to give it a try if the select board will let him and ring it out and see what happens. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I started, as you know, I began where he was, I said, we've heard they don't want this, but then listening to Mina. It's not off the table, it's not off the table, and he could negotiate that, and it could happen.
I also really feel like I've worked on this site now for almost 30 years, our town was working on it 10 years before that, where boards were involved, staff people were involved. Our fire chief was responsible for putting out a fire and doing the work to get them to take down the buildings. We've had to go to court to get them to put in fire suppression. We have put in a whole lot of effort. We deserve this site, and we deserve the Cadillac version of this site. We shouldn't have to be paying off liens. This is something where I really think we do want to be negotiating for the best liability, the most things funded, the best tag grants to cover our expenses that aren't legal expenses. This is worth negotiating, and just because, hey, well, we've got plans, doesn't mean that we shouldn't seriously think of walking away if they can't come up with both financial and liability, the Cadillac of
So
plans.
you're saying we have a very strong acquisition case, we might as well exercise it.
I think Mina should get it from them. I don't think you should just negotiate it.
It
from
may,
them.
it may be,
I really want to see it.
here in your
So
description.
I don't wanna discuss
Yeah.
negotiating strategy more than we are right now.
Right.
Not that it's our strategy anyway,
Right.
because they task force,
And the other,
but I would leave it in there for all the reasons that we said.
okay, the other thing I thought I heard was that eminent domain was preferable to tax taking. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't list all three, but, you know, I thought that's what I heard, maybe I didn't.
Excuse me, you heard what?
That eminent domain would be preferable to tax taking as a way to take.
So we have heard that more than we've heard that any of the other alternatives are likely. And we know this is 2015 warrant language. But we also know that there are other towns that went the tax taking route, and it still is an option open to us.
Yeah,
It strikes me as your description of Mina pointed out, and this was my impression too. He wants all the play on the table when he walks in the negotiation room, list them,
Well,
So it's not.
it's just leverage,
Not a decision the town has to.
What to do.
Okay.
he lists them all, and it's leverage for him, sounded like.
the reason the 2015 warrant article said eminent domain, it was an amendment at town meeting because town council recommended that that was the most effective way to take it.
yeah, and then make sure it's the easiest, tax liens, there's more transactions, it's done, the other. So,
I withdraw my objection.
yeah, I think
The
we'll leave
language
it in there.
can stay there.
I will say just parenthetically that, I should have mentioned this earlier, that I have, Megan asked me, well, if we send this to town council, what we would be asking, and I said, well, he needs to see the whole report, we'd like comments on not only the legal section, but how things interrelate. I basically told Megan, I think this version is ready for town council and staff review, we're making some changes now. Because we want that, so I don't know.
Can we get the footnote in there? Because he might say, please, I don't want you to say that Textron and Whitaker did nice things. You know, so that would be a good reason if the lawyer
I'll
said.
check
don't
with
put it
Megan
in
and see
there.
whether she
Yes,
said
to
that,
see if-
but from my point of view as this chair, I said, this is ready for me this review, I know we've been anxious to get it to him, I wanted to get in the final form of the executive summary and everything. I'll ask Megan where she is, and if we slip in the footnote, we will, but it's, I assume she wants to proceed with that. It's also, I'd like her to review it and Chris to review and get their comments, staff review, if they want to comment, but I'm sure they won't have any comments, because Chris is sitting at 3. I'm kidding, So, we're in that stage now, we're going through this initial review, we'll get those comments back. So when we finalize the report, we'll have Mina's, take advantage of it, have Mina wants to edit this, if he doesn't all. I don't, I would vote on this report and then have them say we need to change some stuff. Okay, anything else? So still, we're still editing form, for the next meeting, we'll see where we are.
Comments go to you or you and Chris, if we
Copy
find little
Chris,
stuff.
but I'm kind of controlling the editing process now, so, but both of us, so just keep a record of it, not keep a record of it.
By the way, this gives me the opportunity to thank you for the shepherding of the craft job that could take place. I mean, committee wordsmithing something is shooting ourselves in the head, as this experience is showing us. And you have been, eye of that storm, so thank you.
We're not done yet, so you still might hate it. So, no, it's an adventure, not without its tense moments, tell you that, but it's great. We have, but this is some strong-willed, knowledgeable people around the table, nobody's a wallflower here, and that's great.
And I think we said it off the record before, but now we can say it on the record that along the same lines, I thought the executive summary was great, just the right, so. I have I have editorial little nit.
There were a few things I got comments, but good, that's the other thing, nobody, I put that in the meeting packet, this was new, but.
So I had a comment about, the list of the work section. That we did a lot of that same work in the reuse section and pointing out how it went beyond the reuse section in each of those items, like that we actually paid for a lawyer this time. We actually paid for we stepped up and paid for the reuse.
Are you in the executive summary?
In the executive summary, yeah. Again, I thought it was really great, but I just,
Where are you?
so I'm on page 3. So, I'm sorry, on page 3 of the legal, of the executive summary.
So what's the heading?
So this is the
So
summary of findings section.
Summary of findings, okay.
And,
Page 8 on the printout.
yeah, so I had actually thinking that in the work section that, or this could go in the work section. I was thinking the work section might be more than you really needed to put in that you could go right to the recommendation. But in either case, so whether you wanted to put it under each item in the summary of findings or in the work section,
What's the
for
word?
each of those 3, the work section is 2 pages before.
Oh,
The works.
The work, it's literally all the work on page 6.
yeah,
And then the legal section, the section on page 8.
Tell me what your main point is, I'll think about where.
So my main point was to actually make a comment about how what we did was different from the reuse report for each of those. So for the legal, we went beyond the reuse report because we actually engaged town council. Town council wasn't involved in the reuse report. That we actually engaged our own consultant to review the human health risks, to do a human health risk assessment. We actually approached it differently from the reuse report for the needs by thinking about the issues in terms of what a potential owner or operator would want to do with the site, not just how the site is laid out for possible use. And for ownership, we went beyond the reuse report by actually estimating the costs.
How about I just say that this work built on the foundation and expanded the work of the reuse task force?
I suppose you could do that, but we did all of those things. It was kind of.
I don't wanna mention that multiple times.
Okay.
But I thought I had mentioned, I think I've been.
I think you actually said we went
It's
beyond the
section-
reuse report.
section
and I-
one.
Pam said that we went beyond reuse, and what Pam said, if it doesn't land in the report, I think it still is very good for select board to hear when we do some of our presentations. Just to be reminded that in very concrete ways, we did what Pam
We stepped up,
describes.
yeah, and we stepped up beyond the reuse report and
It
we
wasn't that
spent,
we thought more deeply. It
we
was- it
spent
went
more
beyond.
money.
Yeah.
And we engaged town staff more deeply to think about these things, so. then we did get reimbursed for a lot of that money with various kinds of,
I don't think the charge was different, I think, for this group than it was for the reuse committee, which was focusing on reuse.
Yeah, it was quite different. In fact, the reuse report, I think the legal, pseudo legal stuff that put in there was,
yeah, we didn't have a lawyer.
I added it, because I
Yeah.
thought it was useful, to put in appendix. There were things we added beyond reuse.
In fact, if you weren't very close to this process, one might wonder, why didn't we do this first and reuse later? That would be the normal sequence in the minds of people who weren't paying close attention to this.
I
Yeah.
think there are
you
a
know,
few of us who wondered why we didn't go straight from the reuse report to just hiring the lawyer and then letting the
Okay,
select board listen to the lawyer directly. So that's,
And Gary commented this, the selector wasn't ready
yeah,
yet.
Yeah.
The reuse report, they were ready for the reuse, but they weren't ready to even think
To
about
pull the plug.
acquisition
yeah,
yet. They just weren't ready.
I think they weren't ready in COVID.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
But
the
anyway,
other-
They quickly got distracted with COVID.
COVID, yeah.
the other thing, and I wasn't involved with the reuse report, is it had a lot of good ideas, but it didn't really put them in the context of municipal and,
Right.
you know, market needs. you know.
Well, right, we also, I mean, we talked about looking at the market, but we're in the middle of COVID. And it just seemed like, how could you really make any sort of
Yeah,
market
right.
assessment?
Well, but it also
That time?
was, it was a time when there weren't, the town itself wasn't on board. They weren't giving us the legal resources. They weren't paying for a human health risk assessment to their own due diligence. They weren't actually engaging us in meetings and thinking seriously about what the town would do with the site. They would say, oh, I don't know, we got enough solar company. You know, so this time we've actually gotten great engagement for the town to really think
I
about
think
it.
that, I don't remember, Chris, our conversation on the tag grant, but I think we identified the need to get a formal human health risk assessment, an independent risk assessment. That was a key piece in getting confidence.
Yeah.
Because it was like the anxiety that Mary described. Maybe they were thinking about legal anxiety, but they were surely thinking about human health and anxiety and the public reaction to a Superfund site.
Right, that's the question I was asking earlier when I was asking about Mary's sense of anxiety, that's in the package.
Yeah,
In the background.
yeah.
The town benefited from waiting, because doing that at this point in time, we had a lot more data,
Yeah.
we knew a lot more about how the cleanup has progressed.
So there's a lot more thorough work. You guys, the interviews you conducted on the reuse, first of all, it was up to date, second of all, it was much deeper and richer than we did the reuse report. I don't remember.
But I'm sort of agreeing with Pam. I think in the work section, you could have an open sentence that says, this work built upon the prior reuse, but went significantly beyond in each of the 4 areas, listed below, or something.
I sent you some comment about it, so you can see what I said. I
Okay.
look at it again before you write it, but
Because we did do a much deeper job in.
The last thing on the, we talked about the appendices for the moment, well, first, we settled the issue about printing and not printing, it's all to be online. We can have as much in the appendices as we want, just want to make sure that if you take a look at that, list of appendices, you should think, yeah, it's in the
It's in there.
meeting packet. There's something glaringly missing, I did have one comment. And I thought that Ken for Kristen's memo,
mhm,
which I think he's about to,
Right.
it could go here or it could go in section 7, where we actually talk about insurance. We
so
took it-
let's see how long it is.
Yeah, it could
Oh,
go,
it's not, you want to move it to section 7?
it doesn't matter, but we talk specifically insurance and
So.
and
so
we have a
the
paragraph on
specific-
getting a quote.
So the specific thing that I was trying to get Chris to discuss, which was the idea of coverage for tort coverage, is that what? So is tort another thing that you go into law for? Is that if somebody, if we mess up a institutional
Yeah.
control and somebody sues us for damage to their health, because they got exposed because of our thing. And his discussion was that we would negotiate back and forth for that kind of coverage, and that was what this memo was gonna be. And then we would just reference the memo as saying, we can buy coverage for this thing, and you're saying the whole thing should go. But it was about a legal liability thing.
Yeah.
It was not about the insurance.
Let's see what Chris comes up with. I do have a. I know a
Do you
little
think it
bit,
should go in seven?
I know a little bit about, I think. Off the record, because I'm not a lawyer, we're not talking about strategy here. If we're gonna get tort coverage, it's gonna get through negotiations with EPA and DOJ, it's not gonna get through insurance. It's going to be, if there are any claims for legacy pollutants, it's on you. Now, coverage for things that we do
Right,
in the future is normal. I mean, we do have coverage for things that we do. If you're talking about tort coverage for legacy
No, she
operations,
was saying we screwed up the institutional controls. And someone
Or
claimed
there
that
was
they,
a claim that we did.
right, there was a claim that.
But that's not tort
we were
coverage.
exposed.
that coverage for institutional controls errors in the damages that we may owe EPA, that's one thing.
no, that's
No,
not
third
EPA,
party-
this
a
is
third
somebody
party-
else, somebody who
third
lives
party-
nearby says, I got exposed because you messed,
Yeah,
because.
that's,
Yeah, and we might be suing everybody, but we might well be, because we had, yeah,
EPA is not good coverage for our errors. Okay,
Right.
but somebody. Right, so forget the, if we don't do any damage, but somebody 10 years from now sues the town for some health issue related to legacy operations. That has to be on
Well,
the
No,
but
responsibility.
that's not what we're talking about right now.
yeah,
We're talking about a claim that, doesn't revert back to, EPA protections by virtue of it being legacy, but a claim that it's not legacy for some reason or other.
It's
So
our
you get
errors,
into
yes.
hypotheticals.
Yeah.
That's the tort coverage that you're discussing.
that we're discussing, and that was why I put it in.
It does naturally feel like it actually belongs in legal, because what we're doing, we're applying legal protection.
Yeah.
So anything that we're liable for out of the result of the negotiations with EPA, those are the legal protections we're applying with the insurance policy. So it does, we could talk about with the cost of acquisition, even though it's small dollars, but really it is,
It's small, but it's real and ongoing, and it has to happen.
Yeah, look, for this, we're not gonna have the answers to this report. But I think we have to define the two areas of potential tort liability. One is sued for legacy operations that we have no part in, and one is for things that we cause. Those are separate things. One of those may be covered by insurance, the other one not. But
And Chris's description of that was that typically if something like that happens, that first you're negotiating some of that coverage when you're negotiating the policy, and some of it you're negotiating when an incident occurs, right? And that was what your memo was gonna describe, and that's long and probably doesn't wanna be included in the text, which is why it would be in an appendix. But being able to make some comment that we can buy
Yeah.
insurance, there is a process that the town's familiar with for getting tort coverage for.
so at one of our early meetings, David asked the question, is that type of liability for this property different from similar liability on other properties? If we do something and the underground storage tank, fuel tank, and somebody sues us, is it any different than that? Are we covered for that?
but I think it's just, maybe the exposures are a little bit, they're more dramatic or higher. So that's really kind of what separates,
Yeah.
what's the cause of the injury, it's environmental contamination, and the potential losses are much higher, so that's what separates it. Once you remove that, it is very similar to other sites that are.
and as Chris said, what we're talking about is simply buying extra dollars of coverage.
Because there's.
To build on what we already have
complexity,
for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The mechanics are the same. Okay.
But this is a liability concern that was expressed to us, particularly with people suing us for something that. At the site, and there are gonna be things that are covered, and there are gonna be things that might not be covered, and how do we make sure that this was one of the ways we were gonna make sure of that. And
Well-
Karen was,
And tonight, we're talking into, if it's legacy, it's over here, and if it's not legacy, it's over here. Well, it's gonna take a bit of time to figure out whether it's legacy or not, that's not gonna be easy either, if any cases brought forward or.
Yeah, if
claims
somebody
brought forward.
claims that somehow or other we negligently allowed somebody to mess with one of the pump and treat systems, we're gonna get sucked into it. I mean, we probably wanna prove it wasn't, you know, our problem, our fault, or that we took reasonable precautions to prevent it, but I mean, I can see that kind of suit.
This is a
Well, hopefully it
question
will
of
never
whether it should
happen.
be an appendix or not.
Right?
No,
It should
no,
be
it's a
the-
Bringing it back to the original
It's a
clause,
question of whether it should
we're
be
down,
in
we're down a rabbit hole of other stuff at the
It's a
moment.
question about whether it should be in section 4 legal or in section 7, which is costs.
It should be illegal.
Alright, let's put it in legal, where it is right now, whoever put it there, Paul, I think you were right, keep it there. And Chris, you seem to agree,
That's
okay, and you're drafting it, okay. And, we can
And we'll have
revisit it
to-
when we see it.
To make a reference to it in section 4 when we finally have it, so.
Anything else strike you in the appendix as inappropriate or missing?
So in the reuse appendixes, we had literally a matrix of all the questions that people asked in our whole process. And it was long and it was, and so my question is whether we're going to have questions like that. We have links to, in our links section or somewhere, we're gonna, in the document, we have links to the meeting recordings.
You want a
We
link?
did not take minutes of those.
Yes, we
did-
did.
Good links, but,
We have minutes of those things that
The
talk about
public meetings?
of public meetings with
Yeah.
questions, with everybody's questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the big forums.
I mean, I remember the first one, I don't know if you
Yeah,
did.
we went back and forth, but now it's every question. The individual asked it is identified, and if there was a response from a member.
So
of the
is there some
task force.
appendix piece that should be
Summary of
questions,
public
public information that we've gotten beyond links to those public meetings and I guess links to the minutes? Which wouldn't be in the appendix, they would be in the link section.
we just have links to public meetings.
Okay, there's no other piece that I have to worry about
We're,
finding.
I'm drawing a blank here, did we post those minutes from public meetings?
Yeah.
or-
I mean, we accepted them as public meeting minutes, so I'm assuming they're posted where the town posted.
I have to check.
Because we had that discussion as to
No,
what
I
it
know.
would, and then we went ahead.
So some, I do the posting of those, so I don't recall, I post the minutes here, but I'll have to check to see where those are. Minutes,
How about
should be on the web.
do you want me to track that down?
Well, tell me if they're there or not, if they're not,
Okay.
if they're there, they're not there, then we gotta find out.
And I have the revised copy myself.
But I think those should all be links to the public forums, links to those minutes.
So, and that won't be in the appendix, that will be in,
The reuse report's already there, we have background documents just on the site already,
yeah.
the whole reuse report, the whole RUE report is there.
We see the links that I have. I went through. If you follow, if you go to the page, so it's. The 4 pages at the end, 3 pages at the end of the 4 pages at the end of the document. Are the listings of things I'm trying to track. So we're down to. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Appendix 4.3, wait, is that the release?
That's the release memo. Chris sent me a copy of
It's
it.
the only MENA memo that's in here,
That's the only one,
and it's the only one we need.
okay, and we don't need the redacted one that
You don't
could,
need,
don't need
you
the
don't
redacted.
need November 27 or 29, no.
okay. We have the interviews in here, we have. I mean, we can think of all the things that you guys produce as background material. I think that's all here. Oops. So these don't need production, this will just, we'll do our own posting here,
We'll post these
Well,
things.
town-
and they- Yeah,
we're posting, so this is part of the production, production's only gonna be.
however, the things that,
But we will need a table of contents, list of figures, and list of appendices.
do we need to give any of this to Mina to review?
The appendices,
I was thinking of 4.2 and 4.3, or 4.1, 4.2.
only if he asks for, because they're all referred to in the text, he wants to see appendix 4.2, or
Okay,
it's what it
I
is.
mean, whether to include it or not. We're not gonna change something, just whether we.
So the,
Right.
but the report proper is gonna need. The list of figures, tables, appendices. And the table of contents, that's what's missing right now.
a table of contents for,
The report,
you have a table of contents already for the report.
I do. Oh,
Well, you've always figured.
So, yeah, so this is like, I went through and grabbed everything that was that was mentioned in the document or was in a footnote of things that I believe are links, and there were a couple that I didn't have links for yet at the end, but, the record of decision, the preliminary design, 30% institutional controls, and the EPA's letter about them. Those actually, Kara posted those, so I can find the links for those, and the draft nulls were something that Kara provided us, like she sent to you the 30% designs on the institutional controls, and the draft nulls are a section of the consent decree.
she said it's 60, we have the 60%.
She sent the 60% just recently, and it's not public yet. The 30% she sent you a year ago, you asked for it, we discussed it at meetings. It's footnoted in the report. And I had originally had them in appendices because it wasn't publicly posted somewhere, so we only have the copies she had sent us. But she has now posted them, so I will find the links, and the document will have the
The draft
links.
laws are in there.
The draft nulls came in that in that email. However, the
They're
draft
not-
nulls
they're
are
not-
not mentioned in the report, and so they are not currently publicly posted separately from the consent decree.
Does the 30% institutional control plan have the draft
Oh,
laws?
Kara
Yes.
has her hand up.
No, it does not.
It doesn't?
No, it's a separate document.
No, this.
Yeah, she's saying, so.
So
we
the
have-
question is, does anybody want me to get the draft nulls published separately somewhere, linked to invent a reference for them somewhere in the document? I don't
Just
see a reason to do,
Kara, let me recognize Kara, because
yeah.
she's probably listening to this and has something to say.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm here. So what that document is the model null from Mass DEP. So it's not site specific is what you have. It's
Right,
Mass DEP's model that they use that then gets applied to sites. And that document was the 2018 version, which is what we've been working on. Mass DEP just updated their model a couple of months ago. So we'll be using something that is slightly different when we draft the null for the site, but we haven't done that yet.
so we haven't drafted the nulls. Did we actually use that document for anything? Because it's not referenced in our report
No.
right now. We described nulls, but we never said.
Why do we need, I can see why we need the institution control document, whether it's
Right.
30 or 60%. Why do we need the
Yeah.
null?
And it's
Not
huge,
right.
yeah, it's a lot of
I
pages.
don't think we need
I
that in
don't
this
think it's
report.
necessary, and
Um,
it doesn't really have any real content yet, because it's not specific for this site.
Yeah,
So thank you, Kara, for posting the other two items so that I can reference them. I appreciate that. And for offering to follow through on this one, but we don't need you to. follow.
Kara, when will the 60% IC plan go public?
So typically, once we submit our comments to Maximus, if the comments are minor, then we'll make it public right after that with the comments. If we need them to revise the document, then it'd be more of a delay from there. So I'm hoping
So
to get
Kara,
comments
when are
in the
the-
next week or two.
It's
What
like,
are comments due on those?
Next week, I think the 8th,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay,
right now, let's plan for the 30% plan and everything, from our. From
That's
the-
what we used.
Yeah, because this, in my eyes, there's no material differences.
It's just a link in a footnote. If
Yeah.
somebody wants to go look at what this is,
Yeah.
the institutional control plan looks like, they can.
Okay, so that's the appendix that should be in here, where was that?
That's not an appendix, it's a link.
It's
So if you look at the next page after appendices, there's links. And those are all the links that, because you said that we would have a list of links. Right, those are all the links that are in the document somewhere,
Should
or
those,
that should be.
should those links be organized by section? Report section? Or
They're,
just-
right now, they're organized by part 1 and part 2, because there aren't any in part 3.
But the link to the ICs, for example, where would those be?
The link to the ICs would go, in section 2, when we discuss the institution, in 7 probably.
We go in 7, because 7 is the.
That's
first
where the
one, right?
footnote is, I think it includes.
That's where we itemize them.
Yeah.
In 7, okay.
But it'll also be in the document, in the footnote, if somebody wants to click on it.
This is a separate part of the report, it's just gonna be this page with
This
the
page
list of
with the
ones.
links on it. And we might want to think about when, for instance, in the opening section, we have a bunch of links in section 2 that maybe we don't want all of them there, if you can look here, for instance. So,
So the report, so after the table of contents should have appendices, and the table of contents should list those appendices in the table of contents. Table of contents should also have links, not list the links, but it should have a page number, so it should be part of the report.
right,
Right,
So they can turn to that page and see the links. We don't have to list the links.
but we'll link the links at the end of the report where all the list is, so that you can click on them there.
right, but they'll just be, the page number will be in the table of contents.
Turn to page 77 for a list of the links.
To find the links.
And the appendices will also each have a link that you can click on in the document to get to where it is on our website too, of course,
Okay,
wouldn't they?
so the table of contents which has appendices, can you just flesh out what those appendices are? In the table of contents?
In the table of contents up front?
Yeah,
Oh, so you want those appendices listed up front,
yes.
as well as in this list? I thought this would go at the end of the document, not at the beginning. But. You know, I don't know, okay,
Let's see.
so how is this not okay for that? Oh, you want a description of what each appendix is to go
The
with?
most reports I read, that
Hmm.
they have chapter 1, 2, 3, they have appendices, but they have the title for appendix 1 is this, appendix 2 is this. Maybe just have appendices that go to a page that has those, keep it simple,
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say appendices, links,
keep it simple.
figures and tables would each be a link to a page at the end of the document.
Yeah.
otherwise the table of contents will be 5 pages.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Turn to page 6 for the table of contents.
So the other part of that was the figures and the tables and boxes. So I basically went through and looked at where there are figures. You also put a figure in the executive summary, which is a same figure that's later in the document. Not every figure is marked as figure this, point that. Some people did that and some people didn't.
Well, I think the editor is gonna have to take care of that.
Okay.
Gonna clean up the consistency in the titles
Yeah.
and the numbering.
I think it's really good, for instance, that we used appendix instead of annex, because we talk about the reuse report a lot, and the reuse report they have annexes. And so you could tell which report you're talking about when you reference an appendix versus that. I had a question in figure 6.4 is town of Concord population over the age 80 and 90 by year. And I was trying to put the sources of each of the figures into the figure list, and I don't know what the source of
The
that.
source of that is,
Rich, we did it.
well, the baseline population is from the town census. Year 1 and the projections from mine reviewed by SKIO using standard demographic model. In other words,
Can you,
Age.
can you write that?
Sure.
To me and send me? So I'll write that in the list of figures. The other thing is the master, the reuse report from which we actually take some of our images has boxes in it, not just tables and figures. And there is a box that is a list of the 4 principles that
Call
were
it-
used.
yeah, just
Can I make
call
it a figure?
Yeah,
Okay.
call it figure 6 point whatever. But I mean, I don't know if we're talking about this yet, you're still talking about annexes, or are we talking about editing? Cause I definitely think the whole report needs an edit.
Right.
And can Skio do that for us?
Well, I was gonna bring that up after we're done with this.
Yeah.
So this editing and then this production. So Chris, the vendor that you're talking about, do they do production and editing? Or do they? One open question for the Carol asked me is that, do we have anything else we'd like Skio to assist with? She needs to know that like today. So we need to kind of decide on that today. Should we ask Skio?
To edit the report.
Maybe it's too late, I think we lost her.
I don't know if we did, but I can just communicate. Are you still there, Karen?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
No.
good.
Yeah, we're discussing, so your question about Skio, the report needs editing. The question is, who's gonna do the editing, the professional editing? I'm looking at Chris and for some enlightenment here.
We are hoping to hire a copy editor to do all the final edits. I think there is still kind of a budget question, and I actually thought Kara had until tomorrow to. So I think if we could just get a little bit more clarity from Megan on that, we could probably get an answer tomorrow. I think actually, with the select board, town manager has a discussion about ARPA funds. So I hate to bring it up during the last select board meeting, like Terry was saying, and there is at least one project that may be deallocated. Which would free up some ARPA funds for copy editing, for hiring an attorney to negotiate or whatever those costs are. So I think that there might be some budget capacity there.
Okay, so should we assume that we won't need Skio's help on editing, that we will hire somebody to do the editing and the production?
Can Skio do the editing?
They would hire somebody.
Hmm?
They would have hired a subcontract, but it'd be their money.
Yeah, right.
Most of the town's money, why not use it?
Yeah, well, to me, the thing that would make sense, because they're so familiar with these sites, is to ask them to do the glossary, that we pick the terms we want defined and ask Skio to provide the definitions.
Yeah, I think that, well,
I mean, I could do it, but
let's talk about the glossary for a second.
Yeah.
I think the glossary, when I did the glossary, said abbreviations and acronyms and defining those, but we would need definitions of terms. For example, Superfund site, there was a mix of acronyms and terms.
That's a list of acronyms.
The term, that's not a lot.
Glossary is definitions.
It's a definition.
Well, for instance, NPL and
But what-
National
what
Priorities
needs a
List are,
That's acronyms.
it's an acronym, but it also means something, you wanna define it too.
Who decides on what needs a definition? You said remediation, leads, we need definition.
So I put some extra, I went through and just made a list too, and.
Why can't we
I
define all
said-
these terms in text like this?
I've got a list that reflects, I think, Carl and me.
I saw that, there was a combination, there was.
Yeah, I mean, because I think there are things like extraction wells, I mean, yeah, we're so familiar with this now, we know what it is.
If Skio could do it, I think it'd be
Yeah.
helpful for people to.
Okay,
There's a lot of jargon.
the next technical, so we should probably ask Skio to do a glossary.
In C2 treatment, well, we know what it is.
Yeah, it's just a lot of jargon.
Okay. So it's a combination of definitions and, or is it a separate list of acronyms, something?
Acronyms is the copy editor. Whoever's doing the editing, they should make a list of acronyms.
That's a separate list of acronyms.
Yeah.
And then there's a
You already
glossary.
made the list of acronyms, though, you did pretty well, there aren't too many acronyms in there that you didn't already get, so.
But that's
I don't think
part of
we need to-
professional copy editing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Whoever
so
doing that is.
But some of those acronyms need,
I'm sorry, so just, that's a draft for SKIO,
And just to be clear,
Glossary.
we've had,
Glossary, yes.
glossary.
we've had Rich's draft of this, we've had my draft of this, we've got your draft of this. I think we're using your draft of this
glossary.
material right now. Yours kind of eclipses everybody else's.
Yeah, but mine doesn't meet the definition of glossary.
Fair enough.
Mine is a definition of acronyms.
Yeah.
So mine is acronyms, we need a glossary. So, I think we should ask SKIO to prepare a glossary.
And there's some items that are gonna be on both, like just being on Pam's point, you could say NPL, National Priorities List, but no one's gonna know what that is.
What it is,
Yeah,
that's
say
the
what it
glossary.
And making it the fact that it's
Yeah,
functionally the
sure.
same thing as
Okay.
Superfund.
Or circle, I mean, you can spell out the name,
Right.
but then you've gotta say what it is.
So Carol, we're going to ask you to ask SKIO if it's appropriate to help us with a glossary of terms for this report.
The ed thing?
Okay,
And-
if you could send an email, that would be really helpful. Laying that out.
And tomorrow we'll confirm whether we also want help with copy editing.
That's what I was gonna suggest. It's their money. Not
But
ours.
not production.
And
Wait,
production.
and production?
What?
Right,
They're
reduction-
asking.
God,
Reduction,
Yeah,
you're saying way out, essentially.
layout.
I want to make a comment about the production.
Yes,
I think that, most of my colleagues on the select board generally use the, digital version and don't read hard copies. So, but some of the public, it depends, you know, Carrie might need an official copy in her office, or Megan. I think maybe the best thing might be to talk to Carrie and Mary. I really don't think we need a lot of hard copies. I wouldn't mind having one myself. But I think, I don't want to see you make, 50 copies and then 49 of them don't get read. So, you know, check
Okay.
with Carrie and Megan first.
we got lots of things, we got editing, glossary, editing, production, printing. We kind of solved the printing, we're only gonna, we'll print some limited number of
We'll print a few
PDFs from the produced version.
Right.
Question is whether we turn that all over to SKIO or not. Will we have an answer tomorrow, do you think?
Who printed the reviews report? Did Theo do that?
I don't think we did that internally, though.
I think we
Aaron-
did the editing internally.
If we can
Aaron,
inquire
thanks.
whether SKIO can do all that first, and absorb the cost ourselves second, would be my
It
suggestion.
was pretty clear in the beginning that SKIO was going to do it. Now, how we got that idea, I don't know, but it was.
Yeah, that was pretty clear of the impression.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send a note
There's
to.
extra ARPA funds
I'll,
using
uh,
Medina. Let SKIO print our.
Let's use the ARPA funds to start the negotiation.
Okay, so let's ask Carol to ask SKIO to do
It's the cleanup. within their
editing and
company.
production, when
Yeah.
we have the fun, okay. I'll send you a note tomorrow.
So are you gonna include everything in the glossary that everybody sent you about stuff, and then we'll cut it down when we later, or,
I'm gonna ask SKIO to put together a glossary.
okay, you're not even gonna give them the starting,
We can give them that.
Yeah, but that, sure, they could use their judgment.
That,
I think you said,
that's me and Carl.
yeah, you sent that.
I
Right?
don't know whether I updated it, because Carl had given me his and I added the ones that I didn't have.
Is Fort Devens on here?
Yep.
Okay.
You can take it off, but I think a lot of people would wonder, what's interesting about Fort Devens? But anyway, but take it off, I mean, I just thought,
I think we're just about done. Okay, so action items, I have a number of things to change and edit on here.
Gotta track down the June 4th meeting, forum minutes. I emailed you the.
yeah.
I emailed you the ones from November 9th. They're on our website. The June 4th are not on our website, so
The
I think
June
they can get.
4th.
We've had two public
Two.
forums,
Okay,
November 9th, 2023, and June 4th, 2024.
I should have the June 4th.
I've already
Not on
emailed.
the website.
I've already emailed all three of you.
and they're not posted as meetings did we post agendas for this? one?
Yes,
Yeah.
the agenda is posted for all of them, the minutes.
The
get
minutes are
posted
not for the second
Friday.
one.
Okay,
Okay,
so you're gonna get those posted,
yeah. when
and I
get-
will. Harvest the links for the links page.
Okay. I'll revise the editing and comments are still open for another
We,
a week. If you have any further comments, I'll try to do the rearranging that we talked about, at the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. Get the date,
So we've got November 12
And
and November
26th.
26th,
Yeah.
the Tuesday prior to the holiday.
so we'll use the next meeting, to kind of, make sure we have all the pieces, and then we'll use the next meeting.
Wait,
to
the
vote.
next meeting is November 12th?
Yes, and the meeting after that will vote.
the 26th, we're gonna vote.
So,
Yeah. I think,
Paul, can I suggest in your email to Kara on, for Skio, you indicate the timeline?
the time is, yeah. If I hear anything different, I will let you know, but, again, the goal would be to get it, voted on and produced. So it's online and a limited number of hard copies for the select board before Christmas. So then we can have a meeting sometime in January with them and then set up a public forum
I mean,
sometime in the third quarter.
we might entertain the possibility at the next meeting that we might need to meet earlier if necessary to approve the final content.
But we just need to schedule.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if we
let's-
hear back that.
Between now and then, we'll know a lot
And the
more.
Tuesday before Thanksgiving, maybe not leave the editor, whoever, enough time to produce the final report, so.
Okay,
So,
so I'm not gonna thank you all and say what a great pleasure it's been working with you. Until we're done, I don't wanna be premature. But that'll happen.
We still have time to change your opinion.
I will be in Kathmandu at our next meeting, and if you move up the meeting to the week where I would be in Pakistan, so I may not be able to come
Yeah,
early,
for
but
sure.
I will be in the equivalent for November 26th. I call it my wife's birthday. Same thing.
November.
Proud of you, yeah.
Any final business, any public comment?
so I wanted to point out that if you write something for a town report, they generally want a high quality copy of your figures. Not just what's in the, yeah.
You're referring to the January short report we have to produce?
No, I'm talking about for Skio, they're probably gonna want copy, we have, a dozen figures that I, for the ones that I've made, I have a JPEG of and I include it.
Yeah.
Whatever, they're gonna want the JPEG of that, so if anybody's got figures that are not, that are, the ones from the reuse report we have. In the reuse report. Did you just cut and paste from the reuse report when you?
yeah, probably.
Yeah, so I don't know where,
So if Skio is gonna do this, I'm gonna ask Skio to let us know what they need.
Right.
if they need anything more.
Tell us what they need, figures, whatever, that's in there. They'll look at it, they'll say, we can do this, we can't do this. Okay,
Paul, having mentioned the town report, which is what I thought you meant for a moment, you're probably gonna have to produce a one page for the town report early in January, correct, Chris? Yeah.
All committees just do that.
Committees work.
yeah, somebody notice the deadline that,
None of us have. It'll be out.
great, something more to do.
Put in there that we met 7 times to make the basic decision and 7 times to wordsmith the report. Yes.
You like,
Just put that in there. I just need the public to know that.
take some picture, walk with the select board.
Yeah, we need a cover photo. Those, I've taken a lot of pictures, those are boring pictures of people walking.
No, for the town, for the annual report, you want to.
No, but I put the cover.
That works.
Is this, should we use the same?
No, I think we should go get some beautiful picture of like a gorgeous bird sitting in the sphagnum.
We should do something very.
You know, like, just get some gorgeous photo from this. Well,
It's a hazardous waste though. Gorgeous bird picture is deceitful.
well, if we get.
Well, it is,
This is not.
get a gorgeous bird picture with a
You know what?
cement mixer in
Risk
front of you.
communication suggestion.
Okay, all right.
I'm gonna ask Gail for the recommendation,
Oh, that's good.
because they could have some photo, be nice if we had sort of something that looks like green development or something in the future, not sort of.
You know, but
This
he's
is-
saying that's deceitful. What's
This
the risk?
looks
communication?
like a lot has been done and
Yep.
it's no longer a hazardous waste
You like
site.
But that's an
And it
old,
has a lot of green in it, whether it's current, whether we get another version or
It's
not.
the same photo we
It
used on
depicts-
the prior one.
So get a different one, put a drone up, whatever. Depicting both of those is good risk communication, because anybody who cares about this and looks at this and says, well, this is not a hazardous waste site, they've got themselves.
I like, maybe we'll use, Erin Stevens flew a drone the last time we did this.
Let's get a new
I asked
drone
if
up
she
there,
had any
Let's show the
drone footage.
progress.
She couldn't find the drone footage.
Oh.
I asked her we could fly another drone. I don't even know who flies drones.
Go to the high school.
No, I bet
There's a lot.
Bruce, I bet
We're
Bruce
shooting
has.
down.
Ask
Imagine
Bruce,
if we'll
I bet he has some drone
Yeah.
photos.
Here's things.
well,
Okay.
I'm sure
um,
Bruce has some drone
we
photos. from
could,
the
we could
last
actually
6
use
months.
the photo that you put the markings on the aerial photo from that. That's a pretty photo, but then it's, 4 pages later into the report.
Right, that's right.
Well, I had a suggestion,
That's a Google
that not
Earth.
necessarily as pretty, but if there are pictures of that tour where the select board, the town, town managers, some of the finance committee folks were walking through the site. I mean, to me, that says, hey, here's a
Yeah.
bunch of,
Concordia.
significant town figures walking around, they're not wearing hazmat suits, and they're looking interested in what they're seeing. I don't know.
That shows some
Something on the-
Concordians
a nice
engaged.
photo, but I'm just saying all the ones I've seen are kind of boring. People standing around.
I'll look through mine, but I think we can get more, and
Yeah. Anyway,
I could imagine even two pictures, one of the new barn, and that says work is going on there, and one of the bird.
You could do
You
it.
know,
for
or
us.
that
You
type
could do
of.
like 8 photos.
I think if you do it right, you could have the work on the holding basin and the pretty bird.
I don't know, we'll see.
I think.
And one meeting to discuss the picture on the
Right.
report.
Oh, we need that meeting.
I move that the meeting is adjourned.
I second that.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.